Hi, I'm Susan Schofer, your certified divorce coach and custody ally. Welcome to this video on realization. This is realization part 2. I want to tell you a story about somebody whose husband walked out on her after 30 years of marriage. 30 years, can you imagine that? Some of you may not even be 30 years old now. Anyway, she thought they had a great marriage and they were on a camping trip they took with their kids every single year. That day it was pretty hot, so she went back to the campsite. Her husband and the kids, they were swimming, doing something campy. And she went back to cool off, and her husband's phone was sitting on the table. And she noticed a message coming in. And she looked down at it, and it was girlfriend, who said some pretty racy sexual stuff. And she scrolled back on the phone, and she noticed that there had been a conversation between the two of them almost the entire trip that she was on with her husband. Well, it was clear that he was having an affair. Now, here's the story with this woman. Not only were they married 30 years, they got married very young and they didn't have their children until they were in their 30s. So their kids at this point were like teenagers. And every year they went on this trip together. Not only did they travel together as a family and do things as a family, as most families do, but she and her husband were also in business together. So they were together a lot of the time. So she didn't even know this was going on. It was just, how can this even happen? I mean, here she's married 30 years, they work together every day, they travel together, they do things as a family together, and he's having this crazy affair. So, needless to say, her trip was ruined at that moment, and she confronted him. She couldn't help herself. And she was physically sick by what she saw. I mean, she was really sick, so she couldn't hide that something was wrong. And he admitted to having an affair with this woman for 8 years. 8 years. It's almost a third of their marriage. And she asked him if he was in love with her, and he said yes. And it was the end of their marriage. Now, not only was it the end of the marriage, but it was the end of the business together. They just really couldn't work together. And she was really concerned about what was next. And as you can imagine, I mean, within seconds, her marriage of 30 years with 2 boys and a successful business just all came crashing down on her. She didn't know what to do. Well, it was a journey. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but she organized herself and figured ways to dissolve that business and take her share and he could take his. And what to do with the kids. And it was tough. It was really tough. But I want to talk about the realization piece of this so that you understand she could have gone a different way. She could have closed her eyes, acted like she didn't see it, or confront her husband and say, look, this can't be. But she asked the pertinent questions. How long has this been going on? He was honest with her. Do you love her? He said yes. And she knew in that moment there was nothing she could do because there were outside forces that she couldn't change. And those were the affair had been going on for 8 years and her husband was in love with this woman. So yeah, she could have held this marriage together for whatever that marriage would then be. I mean, it was full of infidelity. He obviously was in love with somebody else more than he was in love with her. So she came to the realization, this is what is. What was to follow afterwards was pretty scary. I mean, I'm not going to negate it. It's not like she left the campgrounds and said life is easy. It wasn't. It was very difficult. But it didn't take her long to come to the realization, and that's where a lot of people get hung up. What is really happening? She knew in that moment what was going on. Marriage was over. They left the campsite. She worked out a custody arrangement. She found a great attorney, told them what the arrangement she wanted to be after the marriage, and her husband agreed to it. They divided the business. A year later, the divorce was pending. She was in such a better place. The silver lining was she was not with somebody who really didn't want to be with her. She was not in a marriage that was a fraud. She was not staying together and sacrificing herself for the sake of the children and or whatever is supposed to be, as far as a marriage is concerned, for the neighbors, for her family. It really didn't matter at that point. She came to the realization what was really going on, and she made a decision, and she kept that decision. She kept her power. And I know it sounds kind of trite to say empowered or keep your power, but it would have been worse had she done everything to change herself up, make herself look better with the hopes that he would fall in love with her and not with this other woman. It would have been tragic for her to turn herself inside out to fix something that had already clearly been broken by somebody else. And I'm not saying that marriages can't repair, and I can't say that people can't work on keeping their marriages together, but her husband wasn't. He had an affair for 8 years, and he was in love with somebody else. And once she came to that realization, her world changed, and her world changed for the better. I have followed her and learned that she's now dating somebody very nice and has a nice relationship. She's opened another business, which seems to be keeping her pretty happy as well as financially healthy. And her ex-husband remarried the woman he had an affair with. So it was bound to happen. Wouldn't it be better if it would have happened 8 years prior? Sure. But wouldn't it have been worse if it would have happened 8 years later? So she came to realization in that moment, took the appropriate steps for her to live her best life. I hope this story gives you some solace if you're dealing with something similar. If not, please stay tuned for other videos. There's plenty more for where this came from. And in the meanwhile, subscribe to my channel and then click on the links where you can see my TED Talk, as well as join on my website and see all the things that we have to offer. I have a lot of articles, a lot of products there for you to decide something for everyone. So I look forward to seeing you next time.